Okay, let's get started. Our second thesis of today is Naysa. She's been doing a great job. She's got I think the first draft was how many pages long? Like 40 pages? I don't know. It was long first draft. And she's been sort of getting the structure down and doing an excellent job of it. These are her words. She says, first of all, I'd like to thank God for being part of my entire thesis journey, since every prayer included asking for help and guidance. I'd like to thank my parents for the constant encouragement, support, and advice through this process, especially when I was doubtful. I would also like to thank my advisors, Mr. Wade and Miss Denise, power couple. They guided me through this stressful journey and were a huge help in creating this thesis with me. I'd also like to thank Miss Aubrey and Miss Prue for being my panelists and for taking the time to discuss my topic with me. Lastly, I'd like to thank my teachers and friends for being my emotional support system, who constantly told me to chill. So chill now. It's time to depend upon your practice, and you'll be great. So Naysa's title is Home is Where the Void is Filled, Why Indonesia Should Create a Foster Care System. Give me just a second to set up the timer, and then I'll tell you when you can start. All right, you can start whenever you're ready.
On August 26, 2017, an abandoned baby boy was found on the verge of death, lying helplessly inside a cardboard box. One officer, Ida Hutagal, rushed baby Aldo to the nearest hospital as her motherly instincts took over. After frequent hospital visits, Ida quickly grew a deep connection with baby Aldo and desired to be the mother he didn't have. So she filed for adoption, eager to welcome him to his forever home. But her hopes were crushed when the adoption agency rejected her 3 weeks later. Why? One of the adoption laws requires the adoptive parents and child to have the same religion. Ida's family was Christian, while baby Aldo was considered Muslim. Since Aldo was abandoned, he lacked any necessary paperwork to be legally adopted. So, what does this mean for baby Aldo? No biological family to turn to for help, and unqualified to be eligible for adoption. Does this mean that baby Aldo's chances of growing up in a family are next to impossible? Unfortunately, yes. This is the sad truth millions of orphans and impoverished children in Indonesia face today, not just because of their abstractly complex situations like Aldo's, but because of the absence of a well-established child welfare system that helps needy children find loving families as soon as possible. Well, what would happen if Indonesia were to open up a foster care system, welcoming underprivileged children into loving families and a world of endless opportunities? The earliest evidence of fostering children dates back to the ancient Roman times, when wealthy families took in abandoned children under their care. Foster care was primarily developed in the United States, evolving from informal labor exchanges to a regulated system with federal laws ensuring child protection. By the 19th century, establishing family-based care became more common in developed countries, while in developing countries like Indonesia, providing such care remained rooted in cultural traditions. Recently, Indonesia has begun to embrace alternative care, especially after historical events, such as the Aceh tsunami and the most recent pandemic, COVID-19, both of which drastically increased the number of orphans and impoverished children. Sadly, progress in improving the child welfare system has been slow, with orphanages bearing the burden of being the primary system to support all at-risk children suffering from various forms of abuse. However, creating a foster care system involving the help from middle and high-income class families would address the issue. Foster care is a family-based system offering a child a temporary safe sanctuary and provides a child with physical, academic, emotional, and psychological support. It also aims to secure permanent placements when reunification or kinship care, which is keeping family bonds, is not possible. An impoverished child lacks the basic necessities for survival, such as nutritious food, adequate shelter, healthcare, and education, while an orphan, more specifically, is one that had been legally surrendered or whose parents have both passed away. Currently, the main viable options for underprivileged children to seek help are orphanages and other child institutions, often bureaucratic and institutionalized systems that lack key aspects in a child's healthy development. The minor progress in improving the quality of life for underprivileged children calls for Indonesia to take urgent action. Comparatively, citizens unaware or ignorant of the issue are like sailors sailing on unpredictable seas until overwhelming waves of distress make them feel lost and completely out of control. Indonesia simply can't afford to wait any longer until this crisis turns into a larger societal mess, especially without children in stable families preparing them for the future. The ongoing normalization of child poverty, institutionalized upbringings, or poor conditioned environments will create a greater degree of future challenges because our future depends on how we take care of this generation of children. With that said, Indonesia should create a foster care system to support orphans and impoverished children since the current system is ineffective for the three main reasons. The limited number of orphanages available fails to address the large number of needy children, to provide a healthier environment for a child's physical and academic growth, as well as to better support a child's mental and spiritual needs. Firstly, the limited number of orphanages available is ineffective and fails to accommodate the overpopulated needy children. The operational aspect of orphanages formulates a bureaucratic system thus unable to meet demand quickly. With just over 7,000 registered orphanages for 4.4 million orphans, building more is simply ineffective. They demand a significant amount of land, space, staff, and the constant uncertainty of securing enough donations to survive, all of which are costly and extremely time-consuming. Foster care, on the contrary, is simply a family. Dividing the responsibility, yet being under one foster system that provides additional support means greater time efficiency, effectiveness, and productivity. A family's job description does not include seeking personal or part-time staff or private donations, allowing them to fully focus on raising the child. So to ensure effectiveness, why not just provide families? Apart from the limited child care organizations available, the overwhelming need for placements is so high because rigid adoption laws that delay the process are extremely difficult to fulfill, leading many destined to grow up without families. Nearly 90% of children in orphanages originate from financially struggling families and are unofficially given up, making the vast majority ineligible for adoption because government regulation number 54 on adoption laws states that a child must be either legally surrendered or have both parents that are deceased. On top of that, the decree of the Minister of Social Affairs number 2 states that a child above 5 years old will not be prioritized into finding an adoptive family. Think about it. Is a 5-year-old really more deserving of a family than a 6-year-old? Now, the regulations are to ensure the child's safety. However, the complexity and vagueness of each child's status clash like oil and water with adoption laws. Take the story of baby Aldo and Ida, kept apart simply because they didn't share the same religion, and baby Aldo's background information was non-existent. Foster care explicitly offers a more flexible track, where they can support children from all and various complex backgrounds in a home-based setting, and in some fortunate cases, leads to open adoption. Moreover, the overcrowding crisis in orphanages causes many destined to live on the streets. Since 2022, over 9 million children in Indonesia were recorded to live below the poverty line. After COVID-19, more than 25,000 children became orphans and street kids, increasing the probability of more child exploitation, labor, slavery, prostitution, marriages, and other forms of abuse. Foster families would, thus a growing demand for building more orphanages is evolving, but this would only momentarily solve the issue, like placing buckets underneath a leaking roof. Regardless of amount or size, when the rain is constantly flowing, the water will eventually overflow. Foster care system would remove children from dangerous situations, shielding them from the corrupt world. The additional support system for placements would also allow orphanages and low-income families to not feel obligated to go beyond their capacity, allowing them to breathe. Orphanages would be allowed to operate at their best, and low-income families would be able to regain stability. Secondly, a foster care system would provide a stronger environment for a child's physical and academic growth. Foster families ensure healthier, nutritious habits. According to UNICEF, at-risk children often suffer from malnutrition and specifically stunting. Now, those in orphanages may receive meals or food. However, limited funding affects the quality and the quantity of the food, which is detrimental to the child's physical development. A survey done in Surabaya and Malang orphanages based on their food quality showed that 78% of children's meals mainly consisted of rice, lacking any basic nutrients. Foster families would better supervise, support, and manage a child's diet, since they aren't primarily reliant on government income or donations. The children would also have longer life expectancies, as well-nourished children are less likely to go through low immunity, poor brain developments, or struggles with health diseases. Now, not only would foster parents better manage their child's diet, they would also provide enhanced educational access and support in the home. Statistically, the majority placed in orphanages are there because these facilities offer education. But even so, low-quality education is likely due to the large number of children living under one facility where limited education funding must meet every child's needs. In contrast, foster families would provide good quality education due to being financially stable. This would provide a lifelong path for children to enter grade school, university, work in the workforce, and essentially increase employment rates. Besides, foster families are smaller units where the child may receive personalized support from their good quality teachers and foster parents, and also receive personalized adjustment periods for educational studies. Furthermore, foster care would ensure more physical activity. Greater freedom and exposure for at-risk children placed in high or middle-income families broadens their range of possible activities. The activities can be as simple as running to the grocery store, meeting up with friends in malls, hanging out in parks or at school, or enrolling in outdoor activities. These are all considered luxuries for at-risk children. The children would be able to join sports teams, clubs, keeping them stimulated and physically interactive, leading to more brain development and an overall healthier lifestyle. It is also proven that children who are physically active tend to perform better academically, emotionally, and socially. Thirdly, implementing a foster care system would provide a healthier environment for a child's mental and spiritual well-being. To begin with, foster families would ensure strong social-emotional support. Studies have shown that daily social interactions and relationships furnish emotional cravings such as love, care, peace, and security, creating a safe mental atmosphere for children who suffered from trauma or harsher past. Trained foster parents would also assess and observe areas where the child may be lacking and help overcome such struggles with trauma, mental, or health needs through services provided by the system, such as psychologists, counselors, or just a broader social network. Overall, daily social interactions with a wide variety of people establish safety and stability. Now, once emotional support is established, foster families would instill strong self-esteem and self-identity. Because at-risk children are often exposed to abandonment, abuse, malnourishment, lack of education, social discrimination, and other negative stigmas, they are usually prone to develop low self-esteem or confusion in their self-identity. The children, if placed in foster families, would receive opportunities from their foster parents to discover their talents, strengths, weaknesses through sports, academics, hobbies, all activities that will broaden their range of discovering a clear picture of who they are. Children in uplifting social groups will also feel seen, known, wanted, and reclaim their value in life. Training programs would also be available for the foster parents in guidance of uplifting or rebuilding their child's self-esteem and self-identity. We must also take note that one's foundation of who they are is based on the family. Lastly, a foster care system would allow more exposure to religion, leading to spiritual growth. Thankfully, we live in a religious country where the dominant religions of Islam and Christianity establish strong and moral foundations due to the favorable role models that diligently practice religious teachings, living as morally right people. One's beliefs in faith-based teachings also may work as coping mechanisms for children to combat hurt, pain, guilt through comfort of prayer, meditation, or religious communal support. Faith practiced in the context of family would allow the children to understand and reclaim their meaning of life and understand the purpose of their worth. Now, some may argue that creating an entirely new system will face major setbacks, since it requires the society and government's significant involvement. It is agreed that new implementations are generally harder to start, where the general public must willingly participate and receive government approval. Surprisingly, due to COVID-19's impact, the government has addressed the rising number of orphans and impoverished children by piloting successful informal family-based systems similar to foster care in 2020. It seems like minor progress because this idea hasn't expanded any further. However, we know that a seed has been planted, indicating a system like this is possible. Additionally, according to the Child's Rights Movement, the Martin James Foundation, research shows a strong willingness of families who are prepared to take in children and would fully support the implementation of family-based care. Thus, the groundwork is in place to attain full support and involvement from society and the government. Others might argue that a still developing country like Indonesia should be focused on other primary affairs first, such as corruption, climate change, or the gap between rural and urban developments. Now, while such issues are valid hindrances towards the development in the modern world, a well-established foster care system would only support and further advance this nation. One of the main reasons why this nation struggles in various aspects is because of poor upbringings. As stated before, orphans and impoverished children that lack the basic necessities of help and security and guidance are prone to child poverty, low life expectancies, and unemployment. We need to see the bigger picture, removing children out of life-threatening situations and into family-based environments with access to good quality education, healthcare, and security. This would increase employment rates, care for the environment, and fight against corruption. Healthier families mean a healthier nation. Reviewing what we have discussed, Indonesia should create a foster care system to support orphans and impoverished children, since the current system is ineffective due to the limited child care organizations available to provide a better environment for a child's physical and academic growth, as well as better support in a child's mental and spiritual well-being. Now, without a doubt, orphanages and other child institutions have done wonders for children all over Indonesia. But it's a matter of how applying an alternative option, family-based care, would provide children with opportunities to thrive and flourish in a world with more opportunities. Taking that first step draws us closer to a nation where no more child is stuck in the cycle of institutionalization, exploitation, malnourishment, lack of education, abuse, and the devastating loss of young lives. But taking no step at all is like taking 3 steps backwards, because Indonesia will find itself with a lost generation of children who are uneducated, unemployed, criminals, and more tragically, victims of abuse, hindering its future prosperity. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, what possible role can I play to even help these children? We can start by spreading awareness on this issue of improving the quality of life for underprivileged children through public events, word of mouth, or social media. We can also develop charities to fund for the foster system and child programs for foster children to have a sense of community. We can also consider opening up our own homes to welcome underprivileged children into our worlds, where more support, encouragement, responsibility, and faith may be shared to those most in need. As the famous saying goes, one person can't change the world, but the world can change for one person. Thank you.
Nice job, Naysa. Our panelists today are Miss Aubrey and Miss Prue. So we'll start with Miss Aubrey.
Wow, great job. It is clear you have done a lot of research. This is an incredible topic. I love that you're doing this. You know that that's a topic close to my own heart as well. What personally made you interested in this topic?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Aubrey, for the question. So there's actually 3 main reasons why I personally chose this topic. The first reason is, I'm sure you guys know, but my mom is very involved in Rumah Ruth. It's an orphanage that is in Bandung. And despite the fact that it's a very orphanage, it's very well established and it has all the aspects fulfilled, I visit the orphanage and I still see some sort of lack of a natural environment of family-based care. Now, also as a foreigner, as a Canadian coming from a developed country that does have a foster care system, I do see the positive impacts. And I'm friends with some people who are in the foster care system, and I see how well family-based care really helps a child's physical, emotional needs. So that's why I decided, especially seeing the need here is so large. It made me feel why isn't there a foster care system here when it seems like the demand is a lot higher than in developed countries? Yeah.
How do you imagine success being managed? Could you give a couple of examples of measurable positive outcomes if this were to be implemented?
So thank you for the question. I think that if this were to be successful, we would see less children constantly being abused or malnourished, not educated, things that seems like normalized in today's world, especially in this country. And also, I'd like to mention that orphanages and other child institutions like group homes, they're privately owned. So they lack accountability, which means that abuse is it's a high probability lack of accountability, right? And I believe that with this foster care system that would have more oversight and more eyes watching, I believe that this nation would have less children that are uneducated and unemployed, knowing the fact that the population of Indonesia, 1/3 of it is our children. That makes a huge difference also to the overall advancement of the nation.
You mentioned that this would be an immediate help, but also that poverty and some underlying factors contribute to why this number is so high. In the US, the foster care system's main goal is reunification of children with their biological parents. If people in Indonesia, you mentioned, are being given up mainly due to poverty and the life-threatening situations are due to poverty, would it be more helpful to focus on alleviating poverty and for building up those families with community empowerment? How will that also be impacted so we don't implement a foster system and then continue to just have more and more children entering into orphanages and the foster system?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Aubrey, for your question. Could you simplify it into a
Yes.
shorter sentence, please?
While foster care, yes, is of course necessary. I don't think anyone would say, no, we shouldn't do this. How can we ensure that it's not just another solution? How do we actually fix or contribute to the underlying problem?
Okay, thank you for the clarification. So yes, as you mentioned before, in the States or even in Canada or other developed countries, the main priority or goal is to reunify the family with their biological family, or if not, kinship care, so to make sure that the family bonds are still being tight. Now, I don't personally believe that this could be implemented in this nation because this nation is still in progress of gaining rehab for parents or having strong adult rehabilitation or protection laws, where in developed countries those things are already established. Therefore, when CPS comes, it makes sense, right? The children are under the law. But here, I don't believe it would work to reunify the children, because as I mentioned before in my closing, there would be this continuous cycle of children constantly being exploited, malnourished, or not having that emotional stability. Knowing all these factors, I believe that foster care also has the goal of leading to open adoption. And I believe that's a high demand here because many children are abandoned and they lack paperwork to be legally adopted. They don't fit the adoption laws. So I believe that the children would have to go through the foster system to be adopted. So it's a flexible track. I think that would solve the issue with children constantly being in the cycle.
Yeah, excellent. Do you know of any other models from other developing or countries in the global south that this has been successfully implemented, or would Indonesia be a guinea pig?
Okay, thank you for the question. So I just researched, about developed and in developing countries, and the information of foster care in developing countries is very limited because foster care is a very Western concept and it's very foreign, and it's when the laws are already established, like child protection laws or child programs that are already established. However, I did come across one which can be considered a successful foster care system in Malaysia, which the overall nation is similar to Indonesia in the sense of religious aspects or developing country aspects. And the reason why it's working well there is because in 2002, they established a very strong social protection law for children. Now, in Indonesia, why we haven't gone to that extent is because we started with child protection laws in 2001, but it was formulated and better established in 2014 when they saw more reoccurring sexual abuse or abuse with money, things like that. But only until after COVID, so 2021, did the government really establish it and spread awareness on the issue. That's why Indonesia hasn't been as successful with implementing a family-based care such as Malaysia.
Great. Last question from me. You mentioned that foster families would be supported by government subsidies, similar to America. Given that Indonesia is majority Muslim and Islam is widely known to support orphanages over other family-based systems like foster care, how would you imagine motivating government officials to have to be able to fund a foster care system?
Okay, so first, if it were up to me, I would start with urban development, urban areas, where the idea of foreign concepts are more accepted because they're more modernized and more urbanized, right? But I would definitely need the government's significant involvement in spreading awareness and educating citizens on the low quality of life of underprivileged children. Now, to fund for the foster care system, there actually is a finance department and national development planning already in place, where they give 3.2 trillion rupiah to needy children. Despite the fact that the money is allocated unevenly, there is still a system or program that can back up the finances. And also, this would be an integrated system with child programs, child services, such as the Martin James Foundation, UNICEF for Indonesia, Save the Children, Children's Aid Society. All of these systems, international systems, along with local NGOs, would really fund for the system. Also, knowing that it's a new concept, it would bring a lot more awareness to the citizens. Oh, and also, sorry, regarding the Islam beliefs. In Islam, yes, there's a strong belief in giving tithings, right? So I believe that in the same way that they give their tithings to orphanages, they would do that for a foster care system, because essentially it's for the same purpose, to provide a better life for underprivileged children. So I don't believe that it would cause an issue between beliefs. Thank you.
Great job.
Okay, Ms. Prue.
Hey, Naysa.
Hello.
Good job on answering all the questions. Ms. Aubrey actually asked a few questions that I had in place, so perhaps a good disclaimer is I'm not against you, I'm just against your idea. Because once I saw the title, I was like, huh, that's interesting. And then I saw the other panelists, and I'm like, huh, we need a pessimistic Indonesian. So here I am, being the pessimistic Indonesian, bringing up all different kinds of things. Again, I'm not against you.
Yes.
Just defend it as best as you can. And again, I just look scary. I'm not that scary. All right. So I am very curious about whether you have any perhaps information regarding cultural similar systems to foster cares in Indonesia, because you mentioned foster care is a family thing. So are you familiar with any cultural things that's going on in Indonesia that are similar to foster care system?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Prue, for the question. Yes, so I am actually aware that there are different cultural differences relating to family-based care. There are certain cultures in Papua where the families, let's say I have a child and I have a sibling, right? Let's say I cannot afford to take care of all my 10 children. I will give maybe 3 of them to my brother, let's say, right? So there's certain traditions and cultures like that. Now, there are other cultures that really, so for example, Christianity, they really accept taking in children, like needy children, helping the needy. Now, I personally believe, especially in my research, which specifically for this concept is from Ruma Ruth, there is a 50-50 chance of adoptive families that are willing to take in families, which are Islam families and Christian families. Therefore, religious differences seems, the idea of cultural norms of having, let's say, your own child, or being really believing in kinship care or having the same blood, that idea seems to shift, especially in urban areas such as Bandung, Jakarta, Surabaya. Those ideas have shifted. So I believe that implementing the foster care system in those areas first would further develop this idea of just because a child is not related to me by blood doesn't mean that I can't provide a good quality of a good life for this child. And it doesn't negate the fact that there are millions of children that are in need of stable families. Yes.
Great. So you have done that research. So it comes to a question for me too: why bother create a formal system? I mean, like we have culturally there, and we've been working on just fine. On top of that, perhaps another cultural thing that I don't know if you know, we do have like certain cultures where not only is in the matter of kinship, but is also in the matter of like because it's in the same village if you're in the rural area and it works just fine. So why do we bother to make it into a formal system?
Okay, thank you for the question, Ms. Prue. So the reason why I believe that we should have a structure and a stable system is because, again, there are very high rates of abuse that are not reported. And I believe a well-structured system, especially knowing that the world is further advancing, is getting modernized, we need more structure, we need more stability. Therefore, yes, I wouldn't say cultural traditions of family taking in kinship care. I'm not saying to completely replace that with foster care. I'm simply arguing and promoting an alternative option that will create more accountability and less probable chances for more exploitation, abuse, more educated children. So that's why I personally believe that we should implement a more structured system, especially with modernization being a trend in this world right now.
Okay, so you mentioned abuse and exploitation of the child, which I think you should be aware also, since like it happens a lot, where in an extended family will only allow this particular child to be adopted if you give them a compensation of some sort, which means that exploitation of the child, if it's in a very formal system, is actually a lot higher because you can sell your child to the government. What do you think of that?
May I ask for some clarification on your question, please?
Well, a big thing about the Indonesian system is that a new system will always be exploited. Even our old systems are always exploited. Now, the idea of foster care is that you put a child with no kin to another family's place, correct? The extended family, as the examples you have put in your thesis, can exploit the families of the foster care system. How do you suggest to prevent that?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Prue, for the question. So, as we all know, Indonesia is no stranger to corruption or exploitation of money. But because this is a new implementation, I would come into this country with a very established structure of supervision, screening, and like a constant good communication between the foster parent and the system. So, for example, in America or Canada, how the foster care system works is they will first. There's certain stages of foster care. At the beginning, there's the interview and screening process, meaning they do a check on emotional stability, on financial stability, on any record of criminal history or background checks. Now, because of this, that already ensures that, okay, maybe this home is a stable home. Now, after that, there's also a screening process where they will interview, let's say I'm wanting to foster a family, I'm part of a church, they will ask my pastor about me or my fellow colleagues about me, just to get more insight on who I am as a person, what my essential goal is. After that, there are training programs provided by the foster system. So it's a very integrated system with many aspects where there's a lot of accountability. The training programs would also talk about what the goal of foster care is, and I'm very 100% positive that exploitation is not going to be taught in those training programs. Instead, it's going to be prevented because of what we see in the States, for example. So because it's very integrated with social protection laws, child protection laws, the accountability, the risk for exploitation would be less likely than privately owned orphanages or child group homes.
Okay, I agree in that kind of perspective. However, you mentioned a training system, which is concerning because if you want to, you definitely should know that the adoption process has also a screening system for the families, and see, that doesn't fly. So, how do you sell this idea to families in general? Because the idea of adopting a child is ridiculously difficult because of these screening systems. You want to screen and train these people to foster. So how do you sell this idea to families?
Okay, so thank you for the question. Actually, for this question, I will refer back to the piloted family-based care that was implemented in 2021. So the way this system worked was they saw the overcrowding crisis in orphanages after COVID-19. Now, in these orphanages, which happen to be 30 appointed orphanages in Jakarta, Jogja, and West Java, there's a waiting list for adoptive families. Now, these adoptive families already pass the requirements of being eligible for adopting a child. The only reason why they haven't yet is because the child does not fulfill the adoption laws. Like I mentioned before, let's say the parent and the child have to have the same religion. A Christian family is on the waiting list in these 30 orphanages and would love to accept the baby that's in the Islam belief, but because of the adoption laws in Indonesia, they restrict that. Now, why I would sell this idea is because I feel like we should further expand that idea, where there has been a study case of a family that took in 5 children from different regions, and it really showed success. Though there's limited information on that because it is new, there was success. And I believe that we should further expand on that to sell the idea, like spread more awareness from the government of why children need stable families, need stable homes.
Time is actually over, so you've done a great job, Naysa. Thank you. So, really good job. We will meet friends and family over here for photos, and then in only about 6 or 7 minutes, we'll start with Grace at 11 o'clock. Thank you, guys.
Bye. Thank you. That was crazy.